More on this, let's go to Amr Magdi, and he is a researcher at Human Rights Watch and joins me now live from Berlin. Amr, good to see you. Now, I want to hear your thoughts from a human rights perspective. As my guest, Nuriate Son, just said, increased security and more planned protests. What are you thinking right now?
Well, I think that the Egyptian authorities very obviously insisting on crushing citizens' rights. We have seen major street closures in Cairo and also subway stations to impede free movement and to prevent further protests. We have seen also threats coming from the Interior Ministry, coming from officials against anyone who would protest, as they call it, without permission. And we are still actually counting more detainees as we speak. Momentarily, there are more reports about people arrested, people interrogated, and they are faced with very serious accusations, charges by the prosecutors, such as joining a terrorist group and also spreading false news, joining a protest without a permission. So I think the situation is really bleak, and Sisi unfortunately seems to be going forward and gearing up to crush any protests except those who support them.
And you say he's gearing up to crash any protests. This was unthinkable to actually protest in Egypt just a few years ago. What happened? Has the fear gone from people?
I think what happened is that there is accumulation of anger over 7 years of very, very harsh nationwide repression that has affected everyone, and activists from all backgrounds and also non-activists, just lay people, have been affected by this harsh oppression. We are talking about tens of thousands of people arrested over the past 6 or 7 years. We are talking about thousands referred to military courts, thousands also sentenced to death. There is no free speech in the country. There is no any room for any peaceful opposition, and therefore the only thing left for people is to protest. I think there is also economic, very important economic aspect to these protests because
and
of
let's talk about that. Let's talk about that because
yes.
It is something that is catalyzing everything right now, because 1 in 3 Egyptians live in poverty. During the Arab Spring protests, it was less, wasn't it?
Well, these are even official figures and numbers, so maybe the unofficial or independent numbers could be much higher. The measures Sisi's government has taken in the past few years under the gaze of economic reforms and the IMF deal of $12 billion, which is the largest in Egypt's history, I think have made poor people poorer. And people feel that one major demand that they rose for in 2011, which is social justice, have not been achieved. Actually, it's now maybe far from reach. Even when we talk also from official figures, the state budget for education during Sisi's tenure has been the lowest in the country's history. Also, spending on healthcare has been decreasing, let alone all the measures to actually reduce subsidies and the unprecedented inflation rates that reached almost 35%. So there are other indicators, government officials will say, macroeconomic indications that the Egyptian economy is recovering. There's maybe 5% growth rate and so on. But these macroeconomic indicators actually fail to grasp how the poorer people, which constitute 1/3 at least of the Egyptian society, have been affected by these measures, and how essential services that the people expect from any government has been in a very bad shape. We are talking about education, we are talking about transportation, about healthcare services, and so on. So I think people are, Egypt in the past few years, anyone who follows Egypt news knows that the country has been like a boiling pot, without any channels or windows to actually vent or express anger or frustration. And that's, I think, a perfect formula for instability, a perfect formula to push people to the edge and actually make them feel that there is nothing to lose. And I think that was the motive behind taking grave risks, taking to the streets, because everyone who goes to a protest knows that they could be killed, they could be taken to jail and sentenced to lengthy prison sentences. That's a huge risk for everyone. But I think there are millions of people who feel they are left with nothing to lose.
All right. Amr Magdi, thank you very much indeed. Amr Magdi from Human Rights Watch, thank you.